And welcome into the latest edition of the Reserve Squad. Glad to have you with us. My name is Andy Mook. He's Tyler Gelinas. Great to be with you and talk all things Premier League. Tyler, how are you doing today? I know we just had a pretty big game yesterday, so things have been kind of crazy where we live down here.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I know that's not English Premier League there, but we were both from Tampa, Florida. Tampa Bay Bucks winning the Super Bowl. Huge happiness for us. I love the way our defense played. And as you know, Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup this year too. Those are two of my favorite teams. I'm on cloud nine when it comes to sports this year, coming off of those and a Bayern Munich Champions League triple crown as well, treble. So unfortunately I can only go down from where I'm at right now, but I'm as good as you can be in the sports world. How about you, man?
Well, I'm going to have to burst that bubble because the fact that you guys have a treble last year, at least you guys won't be in the treble this year. So had to quick burst that one real quick. Sorry about that.
That's a good. Could be worse. I could be Frankie in supporting Liverpool. So
yeah. It's too bad he can't be here with us. But anyway, we have a lot of great content for you guys. So as always, when we start these episodes, got to do our shameless plug. Make sure you guys catch us on all of our social media platforms. You can catch all of our podcasts on Spotify and YouTube, and then you can also catch all the rest of our content on Instagram and Facebook. So be sure to check us out at the Reserve Squad to make sure that you are not missing a thing. So Tyler, a lot to get into today. We're going to be breaking down the big game that happened with Manchester City and Liverpool. We'll talk a little bit about VAR because there's been quite a few controversial calls in recent weeks. And then we'll also do a quick recap of the transfer January window with a quick little flop or flourish segment since it's been a little bit since we did that. So we'll dive right into it. Manchester City continue their dominant form as they defeat the Premier League champions Liverpool. Ike Gundogan would open things up with 1-0 after missing a penalty in the first half. And then followed by that, you have Mo Salah leveling things up to make it 1-1. And then after that, two Alisson mistakes that will leave City walking away with this victory from with the final score of 4-1. So Tyler, what was your takeaway from watching this game? And do you think that this win secures the title for Man City at this point?
Man, so, first takeaway is wow. It was a good game right up until Alisson decided to, I don't know, I guess he forgot what team he was playing for. Is just really, really rough mental mistakes. I feel bad for any Liverpool fan out there because that's not the way that you wanted that to go down. I mean, you don't want to lose it all, but for it to happen in that fashion was probably incredibly painful. I think City have continued to ride the wave of the momentum that they're on, and I think that they've continued to do it without Kevin De Bruyne, right? I know if you rewind 2 weeks ago, you and I had a pretty extensive discussion on both Manchester City and Liverpool. We talked about, is Manchester City the favorites to win the title? Is Liverpool out of it? At the time, Liverpool was 6 points down. We didn't really know what was going to happen. Fast forward 2 weeks, now they're 10 points behind City, and City have a game at hand, and they just lost in an incredibly, almost embarrassing way, that the way those last 15 minutes played out. So that my key takeaway is City continues their form, and so does Liverpool. And it's not looking good for Liverpool, and it's looking great for City. As far as to answer your question on whether City secure the title or not, I think it's a little bit dramatic right now. They're 5 points clear of Manchester United. They have a game at hand on United, but they have a really, really crucial end of February. If you look at their schedule, they've got Tottenham, Everton, Arsenal. They've got a couple games against Gladbach in the Champions League, and they've got both West Ham and Man United in between that. And when you think about those teams, other than Arsenal, really pretty much everyone is in that top 5, top 6, top 7 range, and Arsenal's not too far behind there. So I think with regards to what's left on the schedule, that's kind of the meat of it. And by the time we get to the game between the two Manchesters in March, early March, March 6th is the date of that, I think we're going to learn a lot more about where both teams are. And if it's still close, I think that will be the day that we decide who is going to be on the best track to secure the title. Obviously, I think City has a huge advantage with that 5-point lead and the game at hand. But if United can get into a hot form with City having some tough games on their schedule ahead and maybe close that gap before that game on the 6th, then I think there's still a chance. So I'm not ready to say that the title is secure yet, but I think when we have our next episode 2 weeks from now, I think we'll have a much better eye into what that date's going to look like. What are your thoughts?
I think that it's City's title to lose at this point. I don't think City have secured the title yet, but it's pretty much theirs to lose, because the problem is when you look at the table, you have Manchester City, Manchester United, Leicester City, and Liverpool. Those are the clubs that are currently chasing City. And City have been winless in their last, I don't even know how many games it is at this point. I'm pretty sure they've only conceded 4 goals in their last 14 games, which is absolutely impressive. They continue to score. You have Foden, who's coming up, and he's consistently putting in good work for City at this point, becoming a regular starter. So I just think with City's form, I just feel like Leicester, Manchester United, and Liverpool are going to be constantly chasing. And all 3 of them dropped points this weekend. You have City that beat Liverpool. You have Leicester, who dropped points, I believe it was to Wolves, who tied 0-0. And then Manchester United gave up that equalizer in the last kick of the game against Everton. So, and that's just been kind of a reoccurring trend, I would say, with the 2nd through 4th place teams that I just mentioned. So when you kind of pair that together with how great City's form has been in and how they just don't seem to skip a beat at any game that they've been playing recently, I think it's City's title to lose at this point. But that's not to say that City run into a rut of form and then all of a sudden Manchester United catch back up. I just wouldn't put my bottom dollar on it at this point. But a lot of great things are happening with City. Foden is playing excellent. Like I mentioned before, his creativity is on a whole new level. He's playing as a false 9 striker kind of, and he's playing a lot more of a freer role, merging onto the left, moving onto the right. I was so impressed with him in that game and the movement that he took. And then I have to say, Gundogan has been stepping up quite a bit ever since Kevin De Bruyne went out injured, constantly scoring goals. He's been a goal scorer. He's been a chance creator. So City just have a lot of good things going on for them at this point, in my opinion. But now kind of flipping the switch and going over to Liverpool. Liverpool, they just bolstered their center back positions by getting Kabak and Ben Davies. So you can tell that they went out and made those purchases to, counteract their injury problems in order to make sure, it sounds like, to secure Champions League football. But if you're Liverpool, what are they aiming for at this point? Do you think that they're still looking at themselves as a title contender, or do you think that they are just fighting for top 4 at this point?
I think it depends on the question of how much is too much in terms of a point differential, right? 10 points, heck of a lot different than the 6 we were talking about 2 weeks ago. And when you look at the form that Liverpool's been in, I do think it's too much. Now, if I were to ask you, Chelsea being 11 points behind with their form, is that too much? I might even feel a little bit different, but it's just the feeling I get with the way Liverpool's going right now is not good. I think their first and foremost priority before they worry about title this, Champions League that, or anything of the sort, they've got to right the ship. And the real question is, how do they get out of this rut that they've been in? Yes, they've been injured, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And when you've got Fabinho and Jordan Henderson starting at center back, that's kind of a makeshift way of trying to just survive at this point. So yes, they go out, they get Ben Davies, they get Kabak for depth and for helping in the short term and just surviving and getting through this season. But I think one of the primary areas that they need to figure out is they're not scoring enough. And there's, when you look at Sadio Mane, who had a clear free open header in the first 25, I think it was the first 25 minutes of the game, somewhere around there. He had a very clear open header after Trent Alexander-Arnold made, I think it was Zinchenko, look terrible, had a great cross, and he got under the ball goes over the net. And you can just tell in his demeanor, right? Like, that's going to happen in a soccer game. That happens to every forward. They're not going to score every single opportunity. But every time Liverpool misses, whether it be that chance or Firmino's volley that was a good save on Ederson's part, they just look defeated every time they miss their opportunity because they're not scoring and they're out of form. And the only way that they could score right now is Mo Salah, and it was on a PK. And I just think that's kind of somewhere where they need to be able to become potent again. Their offense has to step up in order to make up for some of those defensive injuries that they had. And until they do that, I'm not sure that they're going to get back into the form that they need to be in, especially the form they need to be in if they're going to chase the title. So no, I don't think shooting for the title is the right thing for Liverpool at this point. I think you're going to want to change the focus to remaining in the qualifying position for Champions League and doing well in Champions League, right? We're getting to the point where I think next week we're going to start getting towards those round of 16 matchups. Their first matchup is against the team Borussia Mönchengladbach from the Bundesliga, who is not a team to sleep on. But Liverpool's a better team than them. And I think whether it be in a Champions League round against Gladbach or, even if in one of their upcoming games they can find a way to right the ship, then maybe that's the way to do it. But I just don't know that that's going to be the case for Liverpool, and I think I should stand corrected. It's Leipzig that they're playing in the Champions League. Manchester City is playing Borussia Mönchengladbach. But either way, right, whether it's Leipzig or Gladbach, that's not an easy matchup to have in the Champions League, but it's an opportunistic one where it's a good enough team that you can play better than and score some goals against and try to get some of that confidence back. And I think it ultimately boils down to Liverpool getting that confidence back somehow, some way. I'm just not sure. I can't pull a rabbit out of the hat and tell you what the exact solution is, but ultimately it comes down to confidence for me. And moving forward, how do they do that?
How much do you think this is on Klopp? Do you think this is more on Klopp, or do you think this is more on the players at this point?
I think it's good that Klopp has been taking accountability and ownership for the bad form, and I think to a certain degree it does have to be on him. But at the same time, the players have to step up at some point too. Where is the leadership going to come from in the locker room from a player perspective, right? I don't know how important Van Dijk was in terms of leadership from the back line and getting the players to believe in themselves again. And maybe that's a little bit on Klopp too, but there has to be help. Klopp needs help. He can't just be, telling everybody the right words and the right things to say. At some point, it's got to come from a player in the locker room, someone on the sideline. I'm not sure. And maybe it's just got to be through an example of getting in better form, scoring goals, or not having some kind of breakdown the way that Alisson had, right? Like if that breakdown doesn't happen, twice in 10 minutes at the end of that City game, even if you come away with a 1-1 draw against City, there's positives to take from that. But the way that it ended, it's like all of the air that were in their tires is just gone. It's deflated, and they've got to figure out a way to put air back in the tires and keep going. And I think it needs to come from more than just Klopp at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think for me, when it comes to the attacking third with Liverpool, it's not like they're not creating chances. So for me, I feel like the attack is mostly just it's got to be on the attackers at this point, because they're not consistently scoring goals. They have a couple people who are out of form. They are creating chances. It just seems like they're not able to put it into the back of the net. And at the end of the day, I feel like Klopp, he obviously can't go on the field and play for Liverpool. So I feel like to that degree, it's definitely on the players. But I will say to kind of counteract my point a little bit, I do think Klopp has to take some responsibility in here because they're still playing the exact same way as if they had Van Dijk, as if they had Joe Gomez, as if they have Henderson and Fabinho in the midfield. They're still playing with that same high press, attacking fullbacks. And even with their attacking fullbacks going up and Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold, you have then a slow Fabinho and a pretty slow Henderson as your last line of defense if both of those guys are up attacking. So I feel like that to a degree is something that is a little bit on Klopp. I feel like he has to adjust his strategy a little bit. And not to mention, Trent Alexander-Arnold has been awful in recent weeks. I mean, he's been creating chances. He gets up in the attacking third and he does well up there. But when it comes to his tracking back and his defensive ability, that's where he's really lagged. And when he pushes up when him and Robbo push up that far and they just leave Fabinho and Henderson back there, I just feel like they're so exposed. And that's where a lot of teams usually capitalize. And I feel like at some point Klopp has got to realize with the players that he has and the role that he needs everyone to play, granted they're not their favorite role, but everyone has a job to play at this point when your 2-star center backs are out. I feel like he's got to change the tactics somewhere and come up with something a little bit different. But it just almost feels like they're still trying to do an old strategy with the wrong set of players, and he's not really getting the best out of his players. It's kind of something that I think, but a lot to unpackage here. So if you're Klopp, what would you do at this moment to turn things around? Or is there anything you can do if you're Klopp to turn this around other than the tactics, like I mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question because I feel like Klopp at this point, I don't know that there's anything he hasn't exhausted yet. And I think that it's pretty evident in the way that when he has press conferences, he almost seems like he's just at a loss. It's like he can talk about decision making, or he can talk about execution, or he can talk about whatever. I mean, I think it's like, again, I think some accountability has to be put on the players at some point. I think it's good that he's taking accountability, but on the press side, but in the locker rooms, I mean, he's got to find a way to light a fire under these guys' asses. I mean, honestly, I think that the only answer is to be able to just start scoring goals. And their schedule, it doesn't get much easier moving forward. You've got Leicester City coming up on Saturday, Leipzig in the Champions League, and then Everton after the Leipzig game. If they don't turn things around against one of those three teams, obviously they do have Sheffield and Fulham after that, but I think they need to turn it around before they get to the Sheffield and Fulham part of their schedule. And I'm not sure what Klopp can do to make that happen. I just feel like he's exhausted everything, and maybe at this point it's just a matter of time and patience and being able to pull through this adversity and find a way to continue to believe in themselves. I don't know if I were in Klopp's shoes, I don't know, maybe I would watch like a championship series, how you can watch like when your team wins the championship video,
right.
Like maybe play that for them or something and show like where they were at their best and explain like, hey, you guys are the same people. You can still play at this level even without some of the players that we have injured. There's no reason not to be confident in your own capability and know-how, but you've got to come together as a team. You've got to put goals in the back of the net. You've got to defend as a team and help those center backs out. Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's got to be able to stop those wingers from just absolutely destroying his life. And it's just even Thiago, it's like, dude, what are you sliding in like that in the third minute for in that last game? So I think it's a combination of the players, and Klopp's got to pull something out from outside the box. I'm not sure what, but they're definitely continuing to sink down the drain here, and they've got to find a way out.
Do you think Ben Davies and Kabak will be the ones to keep them in the Champions League race, or do you think that them coming really won't change a ton at the end of the day when Fabinho and Henderson are able to move back into the midfield? I know we'll talk about Ben Davies a little bit later.
I was going to say, do you immediately start Kabak and Ben Davies and put Hendo and Fabinho back in the midfield, or do you just kind of have those guys as depth players, when you get into games against Sheffield, Fulham, and because that's, right after a Champions League match and, you're going to need depth? Is that what they were purchased for, or are they purchased to come in and have an immediate impact? Are they capable of coming in and having an immediate impact? I know Kabak's a young player. He's got a lot of talent. But at the end of the day, he's coming from a Schalke team who's dead last in the German league and giving up goals left and right. Is he ready to move to Liverpool in the Premier League and all of a sudden
and defend a title?
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's the case. And I think that the title conversation does have to leave the Liverpool locker room at this point. I think that part of the reason they're probably in bad form is because they're defending a title and a lot of pressure comes with that. Go get that off their shoulders. Get the pressure off of that. Forget about the title, because you've got Chelsea raining down the back of your neck and in great form right now. You've got West Ham raining down the back of your neck, and they've kind of stuck around all year long. You've got a huge game coming up against Everton, who has only played 21 games, and they're at 37 points. If you lose that game, all of a sudden Everton's probably going to hop over you too. That's just I'm not sure that just bringing in transfers is the answer. I think it's a little bit deeper than that, and I'm not confident that they're going to be able to do it. But if you forget about the title and you talk about, hey, let's focus on making sure we stay in the top four and doing the best that we can in the Champions League, I think it takes a lot of pressure off of some of the players, and maybe that's the answer. But at this point, I don't know either.
If I had to guess, it's just pure assumption. I have nothing to go off of for this, but I happen to think that the purchase of Kabak and Davies, Kabak is going to probably slot as the starting center back next to Fabinho, so Henderson can move back into the midfield. And then if I had to guess, I feel like Ben Davies is going to be just another depth center back, and because he played from Preston North End, so then to come from Preston North End and then come to Liverpool, I feel like it's quite a big change. You need a little bit of integration, and same thing with Kabak. I mean, coming from Schalke to Liverpool, so I feel like they need time, and that's probably why we didn't see them in that game. But to kind of sum it all up, we are now seeing that Liverpool are human, especially after last season. So interesting to see what's going to happen with them.
Before we move on, if you had to predict, not only I think it's safe to say I don't think either of us are going to predict that they're going to come back and win this title. Maybe Frankie might if he was in here, but I don't think you or I will. So what I'll ask you, given what I just mentioned about having Chelsea, West Ham, Everton, even Tottenham all right behind them. You can even throw Villa into the mix because they've only played 21 games too. Does Liverpool stay in Europe?
I think so. And the reason why I say that is because I think Leicester City will dip. They're not playing that great of football recently. They got 2 wins in the last 5 games, one of them being a loss, 2 of them being a draw, and they're just typically very strong first half of the season teams. So I think that's going to be an opportunity for Liverpool to counteract it. I think ultimately if Mane, Firmino, and Salah are able to pick up some bit of form and get back into a groove, Liverpool are just going to be unstoppable again, just from the sheer mindset of attacking prowess, regardless of their defensive issues. Because right now they have a lot of defensive issues. There's no question about that. But their offense has the capability to offset that hindrance with their defense. So I think that they just need to find a little bit of form, and that alone I think could save their season. We all know how much they scored last season. So I do think that they'll finish top 4. It is not going to be easy. I think now we're kind of shifting the mindset of, talking about who's going to win the English Premier League and having like a title race to now we're going to start talking about the Champions League race. And I think that's what we're going to move towards here pretty soon. So we'll put a bow on that. A lot to talk about with City and Liverpool, and we'll talk about them a little more as the season progresses. Now we're going to move over a little bit to VAR, and not this last match day, but midweek. There were 2 calls. One of them was on Bednarek when it was Southampton versus Manchester United when Man U beat them 9-0. One of the last plays of the game was a Bednarek red card for trying to get out of the way when Martial was in the box. Martial definitely dove in that instance as well. But it was an instance where Bednarek was trying to move out of Martial's way so he didn't hurt the player. And instead he got a red card. He got a red card instead of a yellow. And then also there was a game in that same day where David Luiz fouled Willian Jose at Wolves, trying to get out of his way, but obviously he did. There was a little bit of contact, but it wasn't trying to stop a goal-scoring opportunity. It just looked like he was trying to get out of the way to prevent causing a foul, and ends up fouling him and gets a red card. And I know we've had a couple issues with VAR recently. I know that you had one you wanted to mention as well.
Yeah, I mean, the most recent one was that West Ham game where I believe it was West Ham and Fulham, where Souček's elbow came up a little high on Mitrovic. But it didn't seem like there was a ton of intent, and it didn't seem, it's just one of those, like, really you're given a red card for that kind of moments. And even Mitrovic, who did sell it at first, kind of got up and was like, no, like he's okay, like it's no big deal kind of a thing. And I think there's a picture out there where you can see, I can't bend my elbow that far, but there's a clear space between his head and the elbow, and it's not making contact. And the fact that you go through a VAR review and uphold a red card for something like that has now led to death threats for the official, which was Mike Dean. And that's not something that I would ever condone in any sport. And he's had to request to not officiate games for the next week, which is just VAR was meant to help these guys. I don't know that it is. And it's just been, a couple of weeks where we've seen a lot of these calls, whether it be PKs, red cards, yellow cards, offsides. I don't know that something has to change or what exactly is going on with VAR, but yeah, there's been a lot of examples here in the last couple of weeks of things not being right.
Yeah, and I think that with the 2 calls that I mentioned before, I just think both of them were definitely fouls or definitely PKs. At the end of the day, they made contact, but they were trying to get out of the way, so I don't believe there was a malicious intent to prevent them or deny them from an obvious goal-scoring opportunity. So, just to give another card, I think it was Southampton's second card that game, and it was also Arsenal's second red card that game as well towards the end of the game. So that just completely shifts the momentum of a game without there being that much
red card
might have
been. I don't remember if Leno. I think Leno's was second for Arsenal,
Leno's was definitely later.
Still,
but like that changes the whole momentum of a game, and they were both trying to get out of the way. So I personally think that those definitely should have been yellow cards as opposed to reds. I think Bednarek's ended up getting revoked. I'm not sure about. I think the David Luiz one ended up getting upheld, but I thought the David Luiz one was more getting out of the way than the Bednarek one. So I just think that we're starting to see a little bit of inconsistencies at this point. And so, do you feel like VAR is doing? We're now in our second season with VAR, about a year and a half into it. I believe it's a year and a half. Do you think VAR is doing exactly what it intended to do at this stage?
No, again, because and I kind of touched on a little bit. I think VAR is meant to help the officials and provide a little bit more accuracy in upholding the rules of the game. And I think it is also meant for a little bit of consistency. And I'm not sure any of those 3 things are being upheld with VAR. It's clearly hindering the officials. when you get to a point where a referee is receiving death threats and has to request to not officiate games. We all have feelings about Mike Dean. We know what that's like, but regardless of who it is, that should never be something that happens. And obviously it's inconsistent, so there is no consistencies there. And then you talk about whether it's accurate or not. Well, now we're starting to get where, like, instant replay has been in the NFL for a long time, and they have a lot of calls where it's like, I don't even know what a catch is or isn't anymore for wide receivers in the NFL. We're getting to a point where it's like, I don't even know what is or isn't a yellow versus a red card anymore. Because at the end of the day, when you have it left up to a referee's discretion, and what you see in slow motion can oftentimes be very different than what you see in the real match, is it better off to just not have VAR and go back to a traditional style where it's the official's right to call in the heat of the moment, and sometimes he's going to be right and sometimes he's going to be wrong, and it is what it is? Or do we keep VAR where we get, super micro analytical about every little thing, and it just points to more wrong than right? I'm not sure. I think with the way that technology is, it's too late to turn away from it and just get rid of it and go back. I think you're going to keep it. But I don't know if you can kind of have a little bit more maybe discretion, or like a fine line, or redefine some of the ways that things are called the right or wrong way. But again, that's also what the NFL has always been trying to do. At the end of every year, they redefine things in the hopes that it would clear things up, and something else goes wrong. And so I fear that the English Premier League is going to follow those same footsteps and start to get to a point where every year they look at things like the David Luiz card or the Thomas Suchek, elbow as examples, and they try to redefine things, or handballs or offsides, and then they change things slightly, but then more stuff happens that goes wrong. I don't really know that there is a right answer, to be honest with you. I would personally keep VAR around, but at the same time, it's a tough job for these officials too.
I think a couple things, like little things that we could do to kind of improve things. One, at least with the which call was it? I want to say it was I can't remember which one it was. I believe it was a Mike Dean one. I can't remember which game, but I feel like when they were showing Mike Dean, or whoever the center ref is, when they're showing back some of these calls, I feel like they're not giving enough context into the sequence that leads up to the foul. I feel like they're just showing like a couple frames before the contact. And I feel like maybe a little bit longer of a replay to kind of show a little bit of the context would, one, help them, make more informed decisions, because you can read intent a little bit better based on how they go into the challenge versus just the quick little second before they make contact. So I feel like showing a little bit more context would help them make better decisions. And two, I guess when I look at VAR, I look at, I can look at a foul out in regular motion of a game, and, there's it's like a quick shoulder to shoulder, and it doesn't look that bad. But when you look at something in a replay where it's slowed down, it always just looks more intense than it actually is. And I feel like that's kind of something that we're seeing, and that's maybe part of the reason why it's not as consistent, because when I'm watching the game, like, oh, that's not a foul. But then when I look at the replay, I'm like, oh, wow, that could definitely be a foul. So I think that it's one of those where you can go either way on a couple calls, because you're only seeing a very small clip of it. You're not seeing the full intent of it. And I feel like maybe they should switch between showing it in slow-mo and also showing it in fast-paced motion too, just to kind of give that alternate flavor to it. And the one last thing I will say, and I feel this way about offsides calls, is that if it's too close to really tell from me being able to look at the VAR lines and looking at where the last defender is, if I can literally see those two lines on top of each other, instead of getting that minuscule with it, I feel like they should, if it's that close, they should just go with what the call was on the field. Because at that point, when you're unable to tell whether one line is ahead of the other because they're just directly on top of each other, I feel like you might as well just go with the call that was listed on the field, because otherwise you're just going to have when you're trying to do it by little micrometers, you're just going to have someone's going to be pissed off on one of the sides, Yeah.
And I want to make 2 points here too. Number one, to touch kind of on what you said as far as watching at real speed versus slow motion. I think that if you kind of rewind yourself, put yourself back in a place before we had VAR, and a lot of times you kind of gave the ref the benefit of the doubt, because they're not going to get everything right. It all happens so fast, and when you watch the game in full speed, you've got one moment, and in that moment, you're going to make the call that you feel is best. And I think fans kind of had a benefit of the doubt, or a little bit of a longer leash on officials, so to speak, in those times, because you kind of just understand as a fan, as a player, as a coach, hey, you're going to win some calls, you're going to lose some calls, and that's part of the game. And that was it. We accepted that was part of the game. You bring VAR in, and now everything is micro-analyzed to the point where the leash is just shorter. And if you don't get it right, all hell breaks loose. And there's always one fan base that feels they're right and one fan base that feels they've been wronged. And it's a lose-lose situation when you start to micro-analyze it and look at it in slow motion, because then you really do sit back and it's like, well, what is the right call? And there is no more leeway of, it's part of the game. There is no more of that. It's like, you got to get this right or else it's going to screw you over. And I think that's kind of the wrong mentality, and that's on us as fans, managers, players, coaches. I think that VAR can be successful if we continue to have that same mentality of, hey, not everything's going to be a perfect 100% call. And I also think you make a good point, and that leads to my second point of, having something where what it's called on the field gets a benefit of the doubt in fast motion. And I'll go back to the NFL. Yeah, I'll go back to the NFL as an example. They have a specific rule on any given play that they have to call a call on the field. So, for example, if a player, the debate is whether he made a catch or not. Did he get both feet in bounds? The officials make a call in fast, real time. Yes, he made that catch. When they go to review it in slow motion, they have to have what's called indisputable evidence to overturn the call, meaning, hey, if it looks really close that he, this could go either way. It's like, his toe is right on the line. Maybe he got both feet down. Maybe he didn't. Then the automatic default is to go with whatever was called on the field. But in order to overturn it, to say, no, it wasn't a catch, or no, it wasn't a red card, for example, you have to have indisputable, clear, concise evidence to say that, no, this was wrong on the field and we're overturning it. And I think your offsides example is a perfect way. I don't know if there's a written rule for the English Premier League similar to the indisputable evidence vocabulary in the NFL.
It is.
But if not, there needs to be. And it needs to be followed if there is, because clearly it isn't.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with it, though, because they write the rule because they want it to be they want to give referees a little bit of interpretation of it, because then otherwise it's supposed to be clear, black and white, but there needs to be a little bit of gray in there. So, and I think that they do, but it's just open for interpretation. So I feel like, because they say it's got to be clear and obvious in order to overturn it for VAR. And I guess the difference is what's clear and obvious to some people might be clear and obvious versus others. So I don't know if there is a clear answer to that, but I guess that kind of leads me into my last question on VAR, and then we'll kind of wrap this one up. Would you rather keep VAR, or would you rather go back to the old style at this point? Your preference.
I really do. Personally, I like the old style. I'm a bit of a traditionalist, but I just, and as I said earlier, I think it's too late to go back to that. I think that the way that the technology in modern times are advancing, I think you've got to find a way to make VAR work. I don't know what the way is. I don't know what future technology is going to look like in sports, but where we're at now is where we have VAR, we have instant replay, and we need to find a way to make it work. I think it's too late to turn back, so I would keep it.
How crazy would it be if we just all of a sudden move back to the old style, and then all these center backs who are very cautious about how they, their arms are behind their back, and like all of their ticks that they look at when they're deciding whether they want to go into a tackle or not, almost completely out the door. It's completely up to the center ref. I feel like that would be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like going backwards in time, and now all of a sudden you're allowed to play at a much more physical level than you.
Because I don't think someone like a Pujol would really be as successful in this league, or like a Vidic or a Rio. Like those guys were it was center backs back in the day were just super aggressive, and that was the style. That was what you needed to be, because ultimately you were the last line of defense to prevent the ball from going back there. Before VAR, you got away with quite a bit. But anyway. Yeah. That kind of wraps up VAR. A lot to talk about, but obviously we don't condone any death threats. Like, regardless of how you feel about a decision, that is never right. That and racism. There's been a lot of incidents of that recently, but regardless of how you feel about a call or anything that happens in a game, those things are just not allowed in our community, and we hope that these instances start to slow down and diminish completely. But we'll move over into the January transfer topic. So we're going to do a quick little flop or flourish segment here. We got 5 transfers that happened in January. A good portion of them were on deadline. Actually, I think all of them but one were on deadline day, because that's generally when all the magic tends to happen. So we'll kind of start here. I'm going to read Tyler's 5 transfers that happened. A lot of them are English Premier League based, and he's going to decide whether they were a flop or a flourish. So we'll kind of start off here. West Ham, number 6th place team at the moment, getting rid of one of their star strikers, Sebastian Haller, for leaving West Ham to join Ajax. Do you think this is a flop or a flourish?
At first I would have said a flop for West Ham's sake because I think Haller adds value to that team. However, and we'll talk about this on our next transfer, I think they found a replacement in that forward realm for him that will be better. And I think for now, in saying that, I think West Ham will flourish without having him because of someone we'll talk about in a second. And I think Haller, I quite the opposite. I would have normally said flourish going to Ajax, but they had to release their Champions League or what is it, Champions League or Europa, whichever one. I think they're in Europa, aren't they? Their roster for that competition, and they forgot him. They just forgot that they had him, and so he's not on the roster for that.
Can you imagine having to report to your boss, I forgot to add Haller? How that conversation would go behind closed doors, I don't want to know.
Can you imagine being Haller? Oh, I'm going to Ajax. I'm going to compete in Europe, and and they forgot
all
me.
Of a sudden,
and
you're not.
now, yeah, because you're kind of like, hey, I got this new opportunity. Ajax is a pretty well-known club. They're successful in their league, and they really care about their Europe, and I'm going to have a good opportunity here, and I'm so important that they forgot me. Like, are you kidding me? And he was a pretty big money move for Ajax. Like normally,
that was their record transfer, believe it or not. 20 million. Yeah. I think it was 20 or 30 million. That was their record transfer, and they forgot their record transfer.
Can you imagine?
I guess they're not used to having to add people onto it, so maybe that was part of it. But yikes, that is definitely a flop. I think I could speak for everybody in saying that part was a flop. But in regards to Haller, the only reason I will say this is a flop for West Ham is that they didn't backfill a striker. And Mikel Antonio did just come back from being hurt. And that is the only part that worries me, because if Antonio goes down, I think Ben Rama can also play striker. But he's been playing more of a cam role recently. That's the only reason I would say it's a flop, is that, they're pushing a Champions League spot at this point. They're in a Europa spot right now. And, if Antonio goes down, that is going to be, that could hurt them quite a bit. I know that they have quite a few attacking options, so, they could probably makeshift if they needed to, but that would be the only aspect that I would say would be a flop, is just the fact that they weren't able to backfill. But obviously right now with COVID, it's very hard to secure yourself a good striker. But, getting rid of one in January, I think is definitely a tough call in my opinion. Moving on here, we're going to move on and talk about one of the highly regarded Spanish youngsters. Martin Odegaard is joining Arsenal for the rest of this season on loan, no buy option, no obligation as well. This is just a quick half-year loan. What do you make of Odegaard coming with Smith Rowe doing well at Arsenal?
I like it. I think Odegaard's a good young talent. I think that I've always been a guy that said Arsenal has needed to replace Ozil and have that center attacking mid role for a long time. Way back when I thought they should have gone after Coutinho. I thought maybe playing Willian there was going to be the answer. It wasn't. Smith Rowe is good, but he's young. He's still got a lot of talent to work on, and so does Odegaard. But I just think that, he's an incredible talent, and he plays that exact role. And he's really going to be able to help Arsenal move forward in terms of transitioning through the midfield and into their attack. And I think that it could be a pleasant surprise for a lot of people. I think it's going to be a flourish if you're thinking in terms of flop or flourish. And I think Arsenal's form will be a positive growth because of it.
I think so too. I mean, for Odegaard, why not take a chance and go test your skills in the English Premier League and possibly drive up your value and, showcase yourself on a different league, especially the Premier League, where everyone, or I mean, not everyone, but a good portion of people want to play in the English Premier League, and that's highly sought after.
And it is a loan, correct?
It is a loan. Yep, no buy option, no obligation. It is just going to be a strict loan.
That's a win for Real Madrid too.
Exactly, yeah, because, he's not playing. I think he only made I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it was 6 appearances total when he was called back from his 2-year loan from Real Sociedad, only to play 6 games. So, he's definitely looking to get some game time. But he actually rejected the Sociedad loan to go to Arsenal and showcase himself in the Premier League. So I think it's good. And honestly, I think bringing in Odegaard is good for Smith Rowe, because then if Odegaard plays a little bit more, it's less pressure on Smith Rowe's shoulders to have to carry the team for the rest of the season or keep up the level of intensity that he has been over recent weeks. So I think this is a flourish for everybody. The only con I could see to this is that half a year is not a lot of time for someone like Odegaard to make an impact. So I think he'll get game time, which is exactly what he wants. But I almost kind of wonder if it might have been better if he were to stay in the Spanish league, where he knows the league and he can kind of acclimate pretty quickly. So that would be the only kind of flop aspect I could think of this deal. But hopefully he's able to turn things around for Arsenal, and they're able to get back up into the top half of the table. Absolutely. Norway's got a plethora of young talent, and I know Holland definitely made a comment of him coming over too. So definitely excited to see him over here. Next one, we're going to talk about a player that's made a few appearances for Liverpool this season, but now he's going on loan to the end of the season with Southampton. We got Minamino from Liverpool joining Southampton on loan for the rest of the season. He already had his first game, scored on his first game or on his debut. What do you make of this deal? Do you think it's going to be a flop or a flourish?
I think it's very similar to the Odegaard to Arsenal deal, right? I think it's Minamino's a similar attacking player on a team that could use a similar attacking transition. And I think that playing in that role behind Ings is going to be good moving forward. I think it's a flourish. I think it was evidence, him scoring on his debut, and that's really, really great for him, for Southampton. I don't know whether he was helpful for Liverpool or not, to be honest. I think, again, he's more of a depth guy, and they were dealing with injuries, and it's an opportunity for him to make better for himself. And I didn't see his first game against Southampton. I believe you did, so you might be able to touch on this a little bit more than I will. But I think in general, the idea of it, I like it, and I think it's a flourish for me.
I think what's exciting about Minamino to Southampton is that he's a great link between James Ward-Prowse, who's playing a little bit more of a holding role, and Danny Ings, who's up top. And I think that takes a little bit of pressure off of James Ward-Prowse from having to, make up for that offensive output by, having someone like Minamino who plays and trains with Liverpool every day, constantly doing the tic-tac passes with, Mane, the whole midfield of Liverpool. So that I feel like that experience would translate really well to Southampton, and his ability to quickly play is going to significantly benefit them. He was very bright in their game. Unfortunately, I believe they drew that last game. Let me just double check. I think they did. Oh no, they ended up losing that because of I believe it was a PK in the last game not the last game, but they played, but the one before that. So I think this is going to be a flourish. I think he'll do well, and I think he just needs to get game time and more experience in the Premier League because he wasn't really getting it with Liverpool. So definitely a flourish in my eyes. This one's my favorite. I mean, obviously, I'm a Manchester United fan, so it's just good to see Jesse Lingard getting out there again. But Jesse Lingard is joined West Ham on loan for Manchester United. This is just going to be a half a season loan. Do you think this one's going to be a flop or flourish for Jay Lings?
Oh man, great, 100% flourish. I watched his debut game, the whole thing, because I'm kind of low key rooting for West Ham to make it into a European spot this year.
They're such an exciting team to watch this season.
They really are.
Like weren't they like a couple points from relegation last year, and then all of a sudden
they did, yeah. So we the reserve squad on Instagram, we do have a post pretty recently that talks exactly about that. Them and Aston Villa, I think they were on, I think it was 16th and 17th, and now they're both kind of fighting for potential European places. What a crazy turnaround. I really like what West Ham's doing. I've never not been a fan of David Moyes. My favorite formation is the 4-2-3-1. Most of the time, that's what they run. Thomas Suchek and Declan Rice as holding midfielders, I think are studs. I think that they're great midfielders, future stars. You put Jesse Lingard at the top of that triangle or wherever, quite frankly. And if they stay healthy with Antonio, Benrahma, Fornals, there's another one that I'm forgetting that plays out wide who's really good there. They've got a lot of attacking options, and it kind of ties back into what we were talking about with Allaire going to Ajax. I know you mentioned earlier that, worried about not having a direct striker type of replacement, but I do think that West Ham has enough attackers to be able to make makeshift changes if they do have injuries. And if not, it's a great fit. And Lingard, he went full Jesse Lingard in that debut game. He scored twice. Every touch he had looked really good. He looked like he had a chip on his shoulder. He took on Jack Grealish without a problem, kind of made him look bad in one or two instances. It was just fun to watch. And I think it's a really good flourish for West Ham. I think it's really good for Lingard. The situation that he was in at Manchester United. It's good to see him back on the field again. I hope that it turns into a purchase, whether it be for West Ham or for someone else for his sake. I hope that he can be able to provide a consistent starting, full 90 minutes and really thrive off of that. And I think West Ham's a perfect spot for him to do so.
Yeah, I mean, Suchek and Declan Rice at holding midfield, Lingard playing above them, Bowen on one side, Ben Rama on the other, and then you have Antonio. I mean, that's a dirty attack. That's a great team.
Bowen was the guy that I was forgetting, and like I said,
he's having a spectacular season.
Don't forget, Yarmolenko coming off the bench is solid too. I mean, they've got players, and David Moyes is strong. And man, again, with the form that Liverpool is in and the form that West Ham's in, without that weird elbow call that we talked about that Mike Dean made that has now gotten him death threats and this whole VAR conversation we just had, they probably beat Fulham, and instead they draw to those 2 points. If they have those 2 points, I think that they're above. Yeah, they would be above Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
So is that a thing to come? I'm not sure, but I really like the direction that West Ham's going. I've always been kind of a low-key West Ham fan since they caught my attention towards the end of last year when we were paying attention to the relegation battle, and it's just exciting in general. I'm excited for that team, and I think Lingard's a perfect puzzle piece for them. So absolutely a flourish for me.
He just needs confidence, and having worked with David Moyes in the past, it seems like he'll definitely get him some chances. So I don't think I need to touch more on that one. I definitely agree. I think it's a flourish, and he just needs to get game time and get that confidence back, and potentially get called back up to the England squad. Moving into our last flop or flourish, we kind of touched on this one a little bit earlier, and I think this one's probably the best debate in terms of our flop or flourish. Ben Davies joins Liverpool from Preston North End as for a $2 million center back. On a team he goes from a team that are fighting to get promoted to the next league to all of a sudden fighting to defend a title. Do you think this is a flop or flourish for Liverpool?
Did you say he was a loan or a purchase? I don't know if I caught
purchase.
that.
$2 million purchase.
Okay.
So it is
for the price. For the price, it's great, right? I think that's a pretty cheap purchase to have some depth. So for Liverpool, I think that's a flourish type of move, especially given their current situation in terms of surviving till the end of the season. For Ben Davies, it's a huge challenge. You're coming up from Preston North End, and now all of a sudden you're asked to try to defend your title or defend your position to stay in Champions League. He's going to be playing in Champions League matches, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe not. It might have been. I don't know if January transfers, if Liverpool has made that roster finalized or not. But regardless,
I don't know if they took off. I don't know if they took off Van Dijk or Gomez, because I know Matip's out for sure for the whole season. And I think those two are still have a possibility to come back. So I think they still kept them on the roster, but I'm not certain on that actually.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Minamino was on that roster or not.
They probably replaced him if I had to guess.
Is it possible, or are they cup tied? I'm not sure how that works. Regardless,
if they leave clubs, they are able to withdraw it. I just don't know what they did with injured players.
Okay, so Ben Davies, his challenge is to go from a Preston North End to a team with the caliber of Liverpool. However you want to write that or define that. And to me, in the short term, he doesn't have a lot of time to really practice and get into the squad because of how injured they are. They want to get Henderson back in the midfield. Is it going to be Ben Davies? Is it going to be, Kabak? Is Fabinho going to stay back there? What exactly is Klopp going to do? I don't know. But so normally I would say it's a flourish type of move because in normal circumstances, you're going to have time to get into the squad. You're going to have time to practice and better yourself. He's in a position where he doesn't have that kind of time. And by the time he gets it, the players that are injured are going to come back and he's not going to have his playing time anymore. So I think it's a little bit of a flop in terms of, I think they're for him, for the player that he is, I would have liked to have seen an intermittent step between Preston North End and Liverpool. Maybe like a Borussia Dortmund type of step for a player like that, because I'm not sure that he's going to have consistent playing time with Liverpool once all of these guys become healthy. And at that point, if you're a player, are you just happy to be on Liverpool's roster and you're being asked to step up in injured in depth situations, or do you want to be on a team where you're going to showcase your talents for 90 minutes a game? I'm not really sure. I would like to have seen the intermittent step before this, though. But if you're Liverpool, it's a great move.
I guess the question really begs, though, because right now you have Reece Williams, who's the other backup center back. Is Ben Davies that much of an upgrade from the young Reece Williams that you have back there? And I know he's made some mistakes, so he hasn't really been the most reliable center back. So I understand getting the depth, but I guess I just don't see Ben Davies for sure being a long-term solution. And I will say, I don't know a ton about Ben Davies. So maybe there's something that I'm missing, maybe something in the scouting report that Klopp sees in him. But I just feel like for $2 million, it's a good bargain, I guess, because they need players in that position with their injury woes. But I just don't think it's a great long-term solution. And typically Liverpool are smart clubs when it comes to making purchases on players and thinking more long-term. So, but if you're Ben Davies, I mean, if you're playing for Preston North End and you get a call for Liverpool, how often are you going to get that call again? So I feel like from that perspective, it's a flourish on his end, but I still feel like it's a flop from Liverpool's. But who knows?
Funny. We're definitely in a couple weeks there.
Maybe in a couple weeks' time, maybe he completely flourishes and, he becomes like another John Stones type deal where he just he flourishes next to another good center back, and who knows?
Maybe. Yeah, I just feel like from Liverpool's perspective, they're just trying to survive at this point. They went out and got 2 center backs to help with depth and survive. And when all the players become healthy, that's exactly what those guys will be is depth players. And I don't know what his long-term future looks like. So for me, I feel it's a flourish for Liverpool because it helps allow them to hopefully survive and provide that depth. But it's a little bit of a flop for him because I don't think he's going to have as much opportunity when those guys come back. But his opportunity is here and now. If he can showcase enough in the next 6 months, then even if he doesn't stay at Liverpool, he'll be somewhere good. So hopefully it works out for him. Hopefully it works out for Kabak. Hopefully it works out for Liverpool, and we'll see what happens.
Will Tyler be right or will Andy be right? Stay tuned in about 6 months, and we will let you know. That wraps up today's episode. Tyler, thanks again for joining me here. Obviously, it's always great to talk English Premier League. Our next podcast will definitely be in 2 weeks. We'll have more social media content, so make sure you check us out again on Facebook and Instagram for the social media content, and then you can check us out on Spotify and YouTube to catch our latest podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, join, follow, whatever the deal may be, so you're not missing a thing. And everyone, you have a wonderful day.
Yep. Bye, guys. Thanks. It was great.